Hi, welcome to the first episode of the 3XR podcast. I'm Mike Festa, CEO of 3XR. We're super excited to share with you our origin story, and this week, 3XR employees Malina and Elizabeth McGarry are going to interview me, and we're going to talk about the history of the company and the work I was doing prior at Wayfair. We hope you enjoy.
Welcome to the 3XR podcast. We know a lot about 3D, and we're working to digitize the world one 3D model at a time. One thing that we're learning a little bit about is how to create a podcast. So join us each week as we talk about who we are, what we're doing here at 3XR, share new and emerging technology, and forecast what the XR future is going to look like. Make sure to like, subscribe, and share.
Hello, I'm Mike Festa, CEO of 3XR, and welcome to our first edition of what we hope to be a weekly podcast. We were at a VR AR event this week and just felt like, there was so much interesting stuff going on to talk about that we thought we'd just get started with a podcast. So I'm just going to introduce my team members, and then we're going to go through a little bit of the history of myself and the company and talking about what we're hoping to, accomplish for you, the viewer.
I'll kick it off. Malina, Senior Account Executive here at 3XR.
I'm Elizabeth McGarry, and I'm the VP of Sales here at 3XR.
Nice. Yeah, thanks, Liz and Malina. So I think we're going to do kind of a Q&A session for this first video, and we'll see how this kind of flows and runs and continue to tweak from there.
Perfect.
Cool. Let's do it.
So, Mike, the first question I've already asked is kind of like how you got started and what, your background. So should we start there?
Yeah, I think it's a good place to start. So, I founded the company about a year and a half ago. But before that, I was at a company called Wayfair. They're a local Boston tech company that's grown from kind of being rather obscure, selling, furniture online to becoming, a pretty big player now in the industry. And, when I joined, I was there for 5 years. When I first joined, I was doing kind of full stack web development. I ran our warehouse management engineering team. And, it's great. I love coding. I'm a software engineer by background. But I've also had this kind of passion for emerging technology. And I've been playing with things like the Oculus Rift and Google Tango. Back in 2015, I had the opportunity through a Wayfair hackathon to kind of present some of these futuristic applications. One of the apps I made was on the Google Tango tablet, which is basically augmented reality using some additional sensors. So today's augmented reality on a phone can just do it with a camera. But back then, in order to kind of create this effect, the software technology wasn't there, but they had hardware that would scan the space and understand the environment. So I had this development kit that I got for my own personal interest. And when the hackathon came around, I thought, this is a great opportunity to take something that I think is really interesting in kind of the future of how consumers can preview and interact content with, Wayfair that was selling furniture. So I, mocked that up. It was just a, weekend hackathon. But I got, we'll link the video, but a pretty simple demo going of a dining room set that you could walk around and see to scale. Which ended up, winning the hackathon, got the attention of Nirsh and Steve, who are the two co-founders of Wayfair. And they thought, like, hey, this is pretty interesting. Unlike some of the other stuff that I'd shown them in the past, like some VR demos, they felt like, oh, this actually I could see people using in the next couple of years, because it really helps like inform how the thing's going to look. And the technology was also a lot more, I would say, user-friendly and ready to go versus strapping a VR headset onto your face. And so, later in that year, we basically ended up creating this research and development team called Wayfair Next. And the idea, behind that team was that I'd be able to kind of explore, new technology, different trends, kind of put together some different applications, work with different other tech companies. So in the near term, we started working with Google as part of their Google Tango hardware. So I had this development kit. They were working on building an actual phone with this hardware. Lenovo launched that phone maybe a year later, and we were one of the launch apps. So it was a good, interesting partnership. Over the years, the Wayfair Next team grew from, just me hacking away to 30 or so engineers. And we started getting a lot more integrated with the rest of the company. One of the other parallel initiatives that was happening was this 3D content for lifestyle imagery. So we're basically taking the photo studio process, traditionally ship all your, furniture, your beds and desks and everything else. And you have to put it together in a room, build a backdrop, take a picture, and then you're kind of, stuck with that picture. So if you want to reuse the same product in a different setting or a different, time period, let's say you do a holiday shoot for Christmas, and then you want to do a spring shoot, use the same content or the same furniture, but you have to order it again and assemble it again and go through the whole process. So we were going through this kind of digital conversion where we were creating 3D models of our products in order to use them to produce 2D photos. And so that was, in parallel happening to the Wayfair Next efforts that were taking that same 3D content and putting it into more advanced tools like augmented reality. But the challenge that both sides of the company were having was the scalability of the content. Ideally, we'd have, high-res renders and 3D models for every product that we sold. And we were selling over 10 million products. And so we ramped up our efforts. My co-founder, Lauren, was working on the 3D operations team, and they were working with a lot of different agencies to kind of scale up the number of models we could produce per month. By the time I ended up leaving, it was something like 10,000 models per month. But, it's a small splash in the, drop in the bucket compared to the 10 million products that we needed to actually get to. And so I had been kind of thinking about this as a interesting challenge, not just for Wayfair, but for the industry. And with talking to a lot of other, folks in the space through some of these standards organizations that were coming together, it became more and more apparent to me that there was going to be a need, especially if, XR as a technology really takes off, to digitize massive scale volumes of content. So not just 100 products, but, 100,000 or, 10 million. And how do you do that in a scalable, efficient way? So that's what I was kind of thinking about before leaving Wayfair, and then 3XR kind of emerged after that. And over the last year and a half, we've been kind of building a platform that enables artists to kind of create this content at scale. And I'll pause there because that's probably too long for that one question.
No, that was great. So I've always wondered this, so I'll ask, so you're an engineer there at Wayfair to start. Is that what you did before Wayfair? Kind of, how did you end up getting into this a little bit?
So I've been, I guess passionate about 3D and coding since, as long as I can remember, really, when I was a kid, getting exposed to, video games, and even things like simple like NES when I was 5 were really interesting and influential for me, because I liked the idea that you could, manipulate graphics to represent something, and you had to use your imagination, especially in the early days, when, some of the first 3D, game systems came out, like the Nintendo 64, the Sony PlayStation. You really had to have a good imagination to really look at one of those, 3D objects and think like, I can swap that out for the real thing in my mind. But over time, as we've seen the last, 20, 25 years, computer graphics have gone from, imagining, some blocky thing to be real, to really being, it's hard to differentiate what's real and what's fake now, especially when you think about like, film and high-end games. The content looks, sometimes better than real life. And then it becomes a job for the artist to go back and kind of make it look worse. So I would say as early as I can remember, I've always had that, vision for seeing digital content as being realistic. And in high school, I had a CAD class that was pretty influential for me. I thought I wanted to be a mechanical engineer because I enjoyed doing the 3D design and content so much. But then when I was in college and I started taking both mechanical engineering classes and computer science classes, I really gravitated more towards the software engineering component. There's a lot of kind of organization and logic that I just, naturally gravitate towards. But now I feel like I get to do a mix of all these things I'm passionate about: emerging technology, software design, 3D content. So it's it's great time to be alive.
That's awesome.
What's your favorite product that you yourself have 3D modeled?
That's a good question. I think like I've got a statue, like a bird statue. In fact, I put it away, but I had it out earlier that I had modeled. This was a piece from the Air Force Academy. So when I first went to college, I spent 2 years there, and they had this, mascot, basically a falcon, carved in wood. It was one of the first products that I scanned after starting the company. And I think it's like number 2 or 3 in the like model IDs. But it's still one of my favorites because I felt like I was learning a few new modeling techniques around getting the kind of roughness map and getting some of the dust and scratches to show up when you look at it from different angles. And it's a, a fairly complex piece in that, it wouldn't be something that I'd want to draw from scratch if I was an artist. Using photogrammetry and, this photo reference data, you can actually capture a ton of that detail like almost automatically, which to me is pretty magical and fun. So I think that's still probably my favorite model that I've made.
Cool. Well, and Liz and I have yet to, I don't know if we ever will.
Well,
3D
hopefully,
model?
I think, part
We
of
don't
our
have a
goal,
threshold on
long-term
3D.
goal is to make anybody a creator, right? So we want, anybody,
Yeah.
including yourselves, to be able to create a piece of 3D content. And maybe that'll be using something like, photogrammetry or, scanning. But hopefully it also includes actually drawing something from scratch as well.
That's cool. So that's actually a good segue into kind of how we're setting up 3XR, talk about like two-sided marketplace and how we see everybody kind of getting involved.
Yeah. Yeah. So, the idea behind 3XR as a content creation platform is really, enabling artists to create, let's say, XR ready 3D models. So today there's, a number of folks that are in, professional industries that create 3D content. I would say the two biggest today are games and movies. Games is probably even bigger now than, but either way, games and movies are kind of the big area that 3D artists kind of spend a lot of their time creating this digital content. And when I was doing this work for Wayfair, it was relatively novel to go to some of these, game conferences and say, hey, we're doing this for real world products. We're doing it for e-commerce. We're doing this to bring, visualization to consumers rather than something that's, purely entertainment. It actually serves a purpose in informing a customer as to what they're going to be getting when they, open the box that shows up in the mail. And it's especially relevant with, COVID today is on everybody's minds. Everybody's been working from home for the last few months. E-commerce has really taken off because the physical stores are closed. And so this 3D content kind of comes back to answer that question. But anyway, so traditionally, 3D artists have been, classically trained. They get an art degree. They work on, again, 3D models, typically for games and movies. And there's this new emerging opportunity to make 3D models of real life stuff for use in, product visualization. And so what we want to do is basically tap into a global supply of emerging artists. So folks that are maybe they're students, they just got started with 3D modeling, all the way up to people that have been doing this, since the early days of computer graphics and are, really experts in the field. But over time, I think we're in this period of, development for XR technology in that it's really the early days. The analogy that I like to use is it's like 1995 for the web. Back then, you had people that were creating, web pages and online content, but they were typically, coming from a coding background. It was a small subset of people. It wasn't really a big career field. Whereas today, I feel like there's similar for 3D artists. There's a career field, but it's relatively small. I think in the next, 10, 20 years, we're going to see a whole spectrum where anybody can be a creator. And depending on, the level of fidelity that's needed by, let's say a brand that's working for 3XR and looking for a specific either volume of content or, maybe they have a couple products and they want them to be perfect. So we can assign that to the, most seasoned artists. But if they're looking to do 100,000 products, then they're just looking to hopefully just get something quickly, and we can get that out to anybody on the platform, even someone who's just getting started.
And I know that ultimately the goal is that scalability piece. So what are we doing to provide for the artists that makes what they're doing more scalable individually?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so there are a couple common challenges today with 3D content creation. One of them, in fact, probably the most critical one, is the inputs. So depending on what you have to work with, whether that's CAD data, maybe it's a 3D scan, maybe it's just line drawings and dimensions and a couple photographs. The input quality can directly impact the output quality. And what we're trying to do is streamline the content ingestion from the brands and the customers directly, such that the artist already has a thing to work on initially. A lot of the work today, if you're a freelance artist, is finding clients. So you have to go on a platform like Upwork. You have to look for potential jobs that might be interesting. You got to find the right price. You got to find, the right customer in the time period, and then go through a whole negotiations process. And it can be frustrating, as we've talked to artists. A lot of times they'll feel like they're pretty competitive and only to get undercut at the last minute or outbid by someone else. And there's a lot of effort that goes into kind of building those initial relationships with customers. And a lot of times that even includes giving away free work or doing a lot of samples in order to kind of get someone's attention, or pricing yourself really below the market, again, in order to kind of get those initial opportunities. And so what we want to do is kind of simplify that process from an artist perspective, in that they could go on to the 3XR platform, kind of see open jobs and take first come, first serve. So anything that they qualify for will show up in their dashboard. Anything that's interesting to them, they can kind of grab for the given price that's out there. And the longer a product kind of sits without anyone picking it up, that price is going to continue to go up. So there's an incentive for, people to wait, because the price is going to go up, but at the same time, that everybody else is looking at the same opportunities. And so when the price gets to something that makes sense to you as an artist, then you can take the job and get the work done, as long as it, passes the final, quality assurance process. Then you basically get paid timely, and then you can move on to the next project. Some of the inspiration is a little bit like how Uber makes it easy for people to make money on the side. I want artists to basically be able to, take job opportunities when they want, kind of on their own time, make their own schedules. But then they also have this, kind of opportunity to build a portfolio and work on relevant, life fulfilling, tasks. So they're not just, driving someone from point A to point B, waiting for the robots to take over and, drive cars for them. Instead, what we're trying to do is we're giving artists superpowers to create content faster, more streamlined, and more consistent. And over time, as the automation improves, instead of replacing artists, it's going to just accelerate the workflow for artists. So those are kind of, I think, some of the opportunities we have that we're looking to build out for artists.
Makes sense. Malina, do you have any questions? I'm looking over my notes.
Well, I was just gonna wait and see if you had a question, but I will say on the
go ahead.
on the or on the brand side of things, right? So, just to kind of chime in, I think we're looking, of course, to build out the global network of artists so that these brands can request content at scale, and we have artists readily available and ready to essentially hit accept and then push that content through. But on the brand side of things, we're looking to partner with either an agency, so maybe like an e-commerce agency or a marketing agency, someone who is working on behalf of a client who would ultimately be a brand of sorts, or with the brand directly and we're looking to essentially partner with those folks who are looking to invest in 3D, in enhancing their commerce experience and ultimately their customers' experience to elevate that, right? And our output is a fantastic AR-enabled 3D model that, quite frankly, I think is going to become the norm of how we're shopping, right? So, Mike, you mentioned the 1995 of online and of just the internet. I was 5 years old, so I don't really remember that, but and I'm dating myself here, but I think what's really cool is it's to the point where, I'm biased because of working here, but I now shop online and all I want to do is see a product in my space, right?
Yeah, I think that starts to become the norm for customers as they start to experience this, 3D AR experience. It starts to become something that they look for and recognize, and we're going to see those, shifts in consumer behavior.
Yeah, absolutely. And so the brands we're looking to partner with are exactly those companies, those folks, those, whether you're a marketing director, the COO, or the CEO, and you want to take your experience for the customer from here to here, from 0 to 100. I think that's where we are the right option. I think that's where, Mike, your experience and what we've learned from our past is, just going to help kind of propel us in this space.
Yeah, one thing I'd like to say on this topic is that, when we were at Wayfair, we were doing the 3D content creation in-house, partially because we saw the results firsthand and we believed that this was the path forward. The cost savings that we're able to, get basically from reducing our photo studio operations to physical, logistics and shipping into more of a digital workflow. It's a shift in in kind of resources and workflow that, internally made a lot of sense to Wayfair to invest in. However, there are a lot of other retailers that are starting to embrace the 3D, content and technology, but they're not necessarily doing that work in-house because it is a large expense when you think about investing across, tens or hundreds of thousands of products as a retailer. And one of the trends that we're starting to see at Wayfair, and, I think, makes sense industry-wide, is what we're going to see, not the retailer or the commerce platform doing the modeling, but actually the brands being responsible for their 3D content. The same way they'd be providing product information, shipping weight, dimensions, largely photographs. Again, Wayfair is a little different in that they wanted their own imagery because the imagery really drove the sale of product. And with 3D content, they were able to generate their own, imagery that had a certain look and feel, where you could take multiple products from different suppliers, put them together in a new collection, and give a customer an opportunity to see an entire room and shop an entire look. And so I think what we're going to start seeing as a requirement from e-commerce companies is that 3D content so that they can create their own photography, they can create, AR experiences, but you shouldn't have to reinvent the wheel and create a single 3D model for an Amazon and a Wayfair and a Target and a Lowe's. They should all essentially be able to get one piece of 3D content. And that's one of the initiatives that we're working on today in the industry, is to drive standards across all the different channels. But in the meantime, one of the value adds that 3XR can give you today is that it doesn't matter what format that, channel partner needs. We can basically convert the asset that we created out into those various formats. And that way you don't have to worry about it. It's not like an agency that might just throw a 3D file back at you. And then you just, you can use it for the thing you paid for. But then in the future, when you have another, 3D project or another company saying, can you send us 3D models? You don't have to worry that they're in the right format because we're basically, as a platform, building out those integrations.
I think the other interesting thing that we're working on is we mentioned how Wayfair figured out kind of what works best. And one of the pieces that we're committed to is figuring out what data we can pull from the models to help people with this whole process too. So maybe we can talk a little bit about, I know that's not immediate, but in the future, like, I know, I keep saying as I learn about all of this, it's like, as much as the consumers are trying to figure out how to use it and buy better and make better buying decisions, I think there's also some strategy and some e-commerce, like understanding that we all need. So I'd love to, I know that we're focused on that through the model. So that'd be great to kind of talk through what we're thinking there.
Yeah, absolutely. And so, today, one of the things that we already offer is an embedded viewer of 3D content that you can put on your own website. It's all native web, so the end user doesn't have to download any, plugins or apps to see the 3D content or even to bring it up in augmented reality on a mobile device. Over, a couple billion devices now are already supported. They can do these AR experiences natively, and you can check it out on 3xr.com to kind of see what we're talking about. But that's something that, you can add to your site, and, with that comes metrics, analytics, and tracking that help you understand the performance. So you can see, how many customers are loading that experience, what percentage of them are clicking into it, how long are they spending and, thinking about that product. And then you can use that information to tie it back to your own, tracking metrics to understand what, conversion lift might look like. There are a number of, interesting studies and numbers that are out there across the industry. But I think, until you run it for yourself and can see that actual metric and understand how this increases sales, it's harder to know, because if you hear, one great number from one industry, you don't necessarily know, was that their implementation? Was it something with their product where they have some other marketing campaign running at the same time? This puts the, power of the data back to, the end user and the brands that we're working with. They can directly measure the impact that the content is having. And the way we're kind of structuring a lot of these early engagements is like a pilot where we'll model a few products for a customer. And then once the understanding from the customer of how those products are performing aligns with their expectations, they can then lean in and digitize their entire catalog. So we want to be a one-stop shop for going from that initial pilot, understanding the data, seeing the value, to then servicing your entire catalog. and then giving you, increased ability to reuse those assets, whether that's through your own website, through the distribution channel partnerships, even advertising now is starting to take advantage of 3D AR content. There's a lot of, especially with younger generations, opportunities to get in front of, different filters through Snapchat, or even just the ability to share a photo with digital content mixed in, to the user's environment that gives them something fun and exciting and actionable for them to share with their network that helps get you, more of that, marketing, word of mouth marketing, by just leveraging, this 3D asset that you might have initially thought you wanted for your website or for creating additional imagery and getting different product information to the customer. There's a whole lot of additional information and value that gets unlocked. And so we want to basically build out all the service offerings as needed for customers.
Definitely.
Mike, so social channels I feel like are huge right now, especially, right? I mean, I'm being targeted on all social media about things I don't even think I'm talking about. I think I'm just thinking about them.
Yeah.
Or the foundation that Liz just bought and we were talking about for 5 minutes the other day. I'm getting targeted on every single social platform.
It is amazing how, how much they know us these days. And the more you can make those targeted experiences like dynamic and interactive, I think the more it stands out to users, because users are starting to get used to seeing, relevant content kind of pop up in their feed, but they're not necessarily used to seeing stuff that they can interact with and pull out into their scene. So there's still a level of novelty that I think is valuable at this stage. And over the next few years, AR is essentially going to become not a nice to have feature, but a must have feature. But in the meantime, there is a nice opportunity to kind of learn from how it works, but also to, make your brand feel really relevant and in the moment, and catch up to especially younger generation and demographics that they're mobile first. They're already engaging with this content through their phones. If they can click into it and bring it into their lives, into their camera, into their environment, and then share that, they're going to. And so this is a great opportunity to basically be a forward-leaning brand and get out there today.
Definitely. I think
Mike,
we're all getting, I mean, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Nope.
I was just going to say, Mike, how do you see, so I mean, our distribution channel flexibility is something that we're always talking about. And I don't think it's talking, I think we're bragging a little bit about it, right? Because we're so excited about sort of how flexible one asset can be across multiple platforms. But the social flexibility, I feel like, is something that we don't really talk so much about, but I do think it kind of correlates nicely to what we're just talking about around, the younger generation is mobile first, and their reality is they're on Instagram and they're scrolling and they're looking to shop on there. So can you talk a little bit about just the flexibility of our assets and really where you see our kind of our social plug-in capability today versus where it is going?
Yeah, so I think one of the interesting opportunities now, and that we're seeing across 3D content, is that the web has become really the go-to, version essentially. And there's this new emerging web format. It's generally called GLTF. It's part of a group that we're a part of in the Kronos organization that's driving this new standard. That same GLTF asset can be used by most of the social channels today. You can basically take the 3D model that you'd see on our website and embed that into, let's say, a Facebook ad. And the look and the feel, the colors and the materials are going to be consistent across these different viewing experiences. And that interoperability is only getting better. Depending on what channel you're looking at today for a retailer, a lot of them are still using more legacy formats, and the lighting and the rendering and the image quality might differ a little bit. But I think the social channels are the ones that have really embraced this newer, web first format. And the other important thing about that is the file size. So we can produce different, file sizes depending on the end application. So some of the, media channels are looking for file sizes that are pretty small and aggressive, around 1 or 2 megabytes. And so there are certain, compromises or, downsampling of textures that can happen in order to support that file size. And we can do that automatically without compromising the, master quality asset that's created and authored by the original artist. And as devices get more capable, bandwidth increases, and, you're putting your asset into different channels on your own website, it might be 5 megabytes that you want to allocate for a higher quality experience. And, again, a social channel might only be 1 megabyte. Maybe in the future, there's, other experiences, whether that's, virtual reality or maybe an in-store display where you've got a really large, 4K TV that you want to bring to the consumer. You want to bring the highest level of detail. We can basically create different versions of the same model that fit all those needs. The same way today you can downsize images to fit, on a print ad that's going to blow up and fit on a wall, all the way down to a small little thumbnail that's going to load quickly on a search result. We can basically do the same thing for our 3D content. So it's a, kind of one size can fit all sizes as needed.
Cool. I have a non-technical question. And you probably have so many moments to choose from, but what would you say, Mike, is the one moment that really stands out as being like your favorite moment since leaving Wayfair and starting the company, what, a year and some change ago?
Yeah, it was. That's a good question, because there's been a lot of fun and interesting moments.
Because like my first day is probably one of those moments. And then so is Liz.
It is. I mean, especially your first day, Malina, that's my daughter Liliana was born that same day, so that was an important day in my life. Of course. And so, as far as I think things that we've seen, company-wide, there's been, a few really interesting milestones. We're a venture-backed startup, so, getting that first check and raising money was kind of a fun, interesting milestone, as was getting into the office, getting our first renovated space up and running, bringing the team together. And, every time we've added a new employee has been, I think, an important and special moment. And, we're still at an early stage, under a dozen team members, but growing rapidly. And so I feel like, those early days, you do really get an opportunity to remember, each and every hire and, each and every product launch. We've had a few product launches over the time period. One of the first ones that, again, is pretty memorable is when we brought a bunch of local artists into the office. I think we had, 10 to 15 or so artists. And, again, this is a local thing. So we're sourcing our networks, some local universities, some recent graduates, some folks in kind of the Boston VR community. We brought them together to kick off our, first external artists working on the platform. And so that was really fun and interesting. And, we're, continuing to kind of hit these different product milestones, which, again, since I'm developing product, also stick pretty well with me. But yeah, so it's been a fun ride, and we're looking forward to kind of the next steps.
That's actually a good segue. Kind of what do you see our next, like, 6 months, maybe 12 months, 18 months? Like, what do you see in terms of 3XR looking like?
Yeah, so the first real year, and we kind of really started in May because that was when the first external team members joined us. So we've been going just about a year, and that first year was a lot about product development and customer discovery, building out that artist network, getting the initial kind of cohort up and running, having models flow through the pipeline, and I feel great about what we've accomplished to date and where that is today. But I do feel like we're still really scratching the surface, especially as we think about, the opportunity to scale up the volume. So I think over the next 6 months, we're going to be, excited to learn from our really initial cohort of customers. The customers we've been working with to date have been awesome, and we've been able to kind of create a lot of different value for a lot of different brands. But I think over the next, especially the next 3 months, we're going to start to branch out into a few different areas, and we're going to look for where we can find the most impact for customers and really kind of go after those segments first and foremost. As we get out, a year and a half, 2 years from now, I think we're going to see a lot more mainstream adoption of XR technology in general. Maybe Apple released their glasses sometime in that time period. And I think that'll open up a whole new meaning for the consumer experience around 3D content. because today 3D is, it's pretty interesting from an augmented reality standpoint, but it's still trapped behind a rectangular screen. And it's not really, in front of you. You can't just reach out and manipulate it. To some extent you can do that in virtual reality, but that user base is so small and the hardware is still very, expensive and hard to come by, that there's not a huge market for that just yet. So I think, what we'll see in the next probably 2 years is more consumer adoption of wearable displays that look a lot closer to eyeglasses, that are fashionable, lightweight, and bring 3D content into your world, into this kind of concept of spatial computing. And once that starts to happen, content that's sold through this new medium really has to be 3D. And so while we're addressing an interesting segment today with augmented reality through phones and tablets, we're really serving, a necessary component for future commerce opportunities, leveraging this new technology. And so I think as we kind of build out our, service offering, we're going to go from, where we're at today, where it's like, hundreds of products per month, to where we want to be at, where we're crossing through, hundreds of thousands of products per month. And so it'll be exciting to grow our user base and deliver more, valuable tools to them over time.
I just thought of something fun we can do because we're going to record this. Or it's being recorded and we're going to play it for everyone. What's your prediction on Apple glasses? When do you think they're going to do it?
That's a good question. I think it's going to
So
be
we can come back and
2021.
see.
I don't know what time of the year. I'd say probably the fall. They typically have a lot of big product launches in the fall, but again, the iPad came out in April. So who knows? We'll see. But I think 2021 is probably the year that they'll get something out there. I think it'll be a device that still utilizes an iPhone or hopefully an iPad as well. But I don't think it would have all the components in a standalone device. I think it'll be more like an Apple Watch that's an accessory. And, like the original iPhone, it'll probably be, historically, when we look back 5 years from now, lacking in features. But I think when it comes out, it'll probably embrace a lot of things that existing glasses can do today, whether that's a HoloLens, a Magic Leap, or, various glasses that are a little bit more slim and industrial. Anyway, that's my prediction.
All right. That's good. I trust you,
Liz?
so I'm gonna go with it. I'll go fall 21.
Any thoughts,
That's a
Malina?
good
You wanna shake it up? You think they'll be a little later, earlier?
I don't know. My concern is, are they going to look okay? Like I will buy them and I will invest in them if I'll look good, right? Like if they look like my blue light glasses, I would be okay with that. But if they're going to look like the headset that Liz just got, with even looking at it in the
on your
box,
face,
or like wrist things for it, I'm like, I mean, clearly I know how to sell what we're doing. I don't know how to sell a headset, but
I think that's why VR has kind of remained like a niche product for gamers today. It's it's not sleek and stylish. Where I have faith in Apple that when they release a product, they do it in a way that does make you want it. Even AirPods and things, like if it wasn't Apple releasing it, I don't know that they could get away with it, right? Even smartwatches weren't really that popular or that much of a thing until Apple did it. Same with smartphones. Before the iPhone, which a lot of people think of as the first smartphone, there were a number of other smartphones out there. In fact, one of these shows we should do old tech that I have lying around. I get an interesting. I get one of the first mobile devices that had Wi-Fi on it. And it was pretty clunky, but it was basically an iPhone 3 or 4 years before the iPhone came out. And I think people are, it's easy to forget that unless you're, a tech enthusiast in this space where you see these kind of products evolving, until a company like Apple can kind of make it mass market and make it appealing to everybody and find the right, style and look and price point. A lot of these things are, already out there. And so I see the technology today being in that same place where right before the iPhone dropped, you had devices that were out there that were, had the features that, the iPhone had when it came out, but didn't necessarily have the look and the form factor. And I think that's the state of the technology today. The wearable displays aren't perfect. They're not as good as they're going to be in 10 years, but they're good enough for Apple to turn it into a product that I think consumers are going to want. And it's going to unlock new functionality that, you know, a lot of us developers haven't even thought of yet. And so that's, you know, one of the most exciting opportunities, I think, to having a commercially viable, mass adopted platform is you get a lot more people creating a lot more experiences because you get over that chicken and egg problem that the industry's kind of in right now. There's not a lot of content because there's not a lot of consumers. And so, you know, you see a few different interesting, you know, apps and experiences, but there's no killer app yet. And so I don't know that Apple's going to launch a killer app with the hardware, but I think if they bring that hardware out there, there'll be enough developers creating experiences in the first couple of years that we'll start to wonder, you know, how we lived without all these, you know, heads up displays and, you know, basically Terminator vision to understand stuff in our world. There's going to be a lot, I think, that's going to change with the technology. But when it first drops, like everything already exists today to enable it, other than, you know, the nice looking form factor that I think Apple, if anyone can do it right, they can do that right. So we'll see. All eyes are on them right now.
Yeah. I mean, you just said that, and I was thinking about my watch, and it's such a good example of when I first got it. It was like it didn't really do anything for me. And it was just, like there wasn't.
But it looked good, and it was like
it looks good. Yeah, and I was more curious, right? I did, like, it's still to this day the number one use case is my niece. I get updates on when new photos are updated, and that is my favorite thing. First time that I watch, not something I think it was intended for, but. I think it's a good story about how, you know, when it looks cool and people want to be on the bleeding edge of it, and it takes a little time for that kind of everybody to get on board with it when it's a little bit more functional. So
yeah, I mean, I think Google ran into this problem with Google Glass. Like conceptually, when they released videos around what it was supposed to do, it looked amazing, but it was basically overhyped and then underdelivered. And then, you know, when it came out, it was super expensive. It was, you know, not very consumer friendly, and it didn't, again, do much. It just had a little, you know, square in the corner that give you some displays and some information. I think, like, you know, Apple can avoid that outcome by creating a really functional product, and also something that's kind of privacy focused. I think the glasses probably won't have a traditional camera on them. They'll probably have the like LiDAR depth sensor that the new iPads have on them. And that will, you know, I think alleviate a lot of privacy concerns. There's still going to be a whole new privacy, you know, debate that I think gets opened up by this technology. But I think, you know, as far as people being concerned about traditional video getting recorded, if they're not putting a regular, you know, 2D camera on there, like Google Glass did, I think they can largely sidestep that concern. And the data that's being collected, while it's kind of rich, interesting 3D information, in and of itself, it's not really that telling, at least today. Maybe in the future, there'll be a different understanding and awareness of what devices can kind of capture in a space. But I think we're going to see that throughout all technology, like self-driving cars that might use similar tech are going to be constantly recording. And so it's going to be just something that consumers have to figure out over time. And we've done that with, you know, things like Alexa and, you know, Google Home and devices that are pretty much always listening to us now, which, you know, 20, 30 years ago would have been unimaginable. You know, we think that there's some foreign government spying on us or our own government or whatever, and no one would want to trust any of these products. And today, the convenience that they offer vastly outweighs the, you know, the concerns for the majority of people, not for everybody. But anyway, I think it's,
I was gonna say,
it's going to be an interesting,
sure
you know, an interesting question is, you know, how do these, you know, wearable devices that are scanning 3D space and understanding 3D space in order to function, how do those become, you know, something that people trust for privacy?
Yeah, I'm hoping that this space too, that's what we'll be talking about, is kind of as these things come up. I think there's a whole bunch of, we were talking about at the conference, kind of like, I didn't even think about, like, when we're modeling something that's not ours, like what are the rights around that? How there's a whole, there's a lot of implications.
I'm sure we can do one or maybe a few episodes around some of these topics, which is going to be great.
Well, that's why it seems like a good pitch for what we're doing. Like anything that's kind of going on in this world, this is what we want to be talking about.
yeah, this is probably a good time to, wrap up our first episode. And we'll see
Before
how.
you do that, I have
Oh,
one
yes.
burning question that I
Okay,
feel like
let's do a last
belongs.
question.
I just feel like it belongs in this first episode, which is, and I don't think I asked this until maybe like my third week, which I'm shocked because this is usually something that I would have asked like before I even started. But how did you come up with 3XR? Like the
Oh, for
name?
the name? Yeah.
That's a
I
good
mean,
one.
And I mean,
it's,
in tandem, what is XR, right?
yes,
Because
exactly. And so
the
the
audience
answers kind of
actually
relate to
just
each other,
recently learned
right?
about that. Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, the first part, 3 is kind of 3D, right? So wanted something that would be representative of 3D technology and 3D content. It also is, fortunate that it comes at the top of most alphabetical lists. So having a company ranking that goes near the top was something that I thought would be valuable. But yeah, so 3 for 3D, and then XR for this kind of I would say today it's still probably like an industry insider's term, but I was finding over time, virtual reality, VR, was kind of the main acronym that everybody was referring to in this kind of technology space. And then augmented reality, AR, started to kind of like gain more traction and have more interesting use cases. Again, the Wayfair story that I mentioned, I did a VR hackathon before I did an AR hackathon. And VR has been around, I would say, a little bit longer. I mean, VR as a concept has been around for a long time. But in the recent, days, starting in, 2012, let's say with the Oculus Rift Kickstarter announcement, virtual reality has kind of been pushed back into the mainstream, and augmented reality has been following that a couple years behind. So anyway, the industry was starting to see, virtual reality, augmented reality, and so you'd have a lot of these acronyms stuck together, VR, AR, AR, VR. And then Microsoft got in on it with mixed reality, MR. They were pushing that for, basically being a spectrum. And so the way a lot of us think about with virtual reality and augmented reality is it's really the same thing. It's just how much of the real world do you see. With virtual reality, you see none of the real world. It's a complete virtual world. You're isolated and you're taken out of where you are. With augmented reality, you're bringing some digital information into the world, but they're still your surroundings, whether that's a camera or your own vision. And mixed reality is kind of this idea of, there's something in the middle. Like you might be replacing some of the world with a digital scan, but you're still interacting with things in the real world. Anyway, so Microsoft embraced mixed reality as a term to describe both their AR projects like HoloLens and some of their VR projects, like a lot of these, they call them mixed reality displays for Windows. And so then the industry started saying AR, VR, MR, and that became quite a mouthful. And so there's this term XR that was just kind of meant to encompass everything. So X being kind of like the, wild card variable from, algebra, or X like an unknown, or X for extended reality. So XR is what I've seen industry-wide become the standard way of describing this technology space. So if you have a conference coming up, it's a lot of times like XR in education, or, XR for the enterprise.
Mm-hmm.
And the industry has got into this because it's a small, nice term. And so I felt like, we're starting this company now. People still don't really know XR as a term, which is okay. It means, it's easier to get a trademark and a domain and everything else. So 3XR, nice short little name that describes roughly what we're doing. And, I think XR will hopefully be the mainstream term, but even if it doesn't, it's still a unique name for us.
Mm-hmm. And blue was selected because that's your favorite color.
Yeah, I like blue, and
right.
I've done a lot of projects and other, endeavors that have used some form of blue. So I wanted to kind of bring that into the mix.
I'm a fan of all of that. Yeah,
Nice.
Love a good blue shirt.
Yep. Yeah, give me 3XR shirt, of course.
I'll have mine next time. Okay, to-do list before, yeah.
Yeah, we'll have to create a merch section of the website, of course, but no, we're not there yet.
Yeah,
get your merch one of these days. Yeah.
Pre-sale on now. We'll have some options.
Hand sanitizer.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Well, I mean, if anything, we should just show this to people who start at our company in the next short term. This is a really good overview of everything they were doing. So I thought
Yeah,
this was
no, that's
great.
good. And hopefully this has been fun and interesting for you at home or wherever to watch. And we'll try to keep producing more content. So yeah, thanks for tuning in, and check out the next episodes as they come.
Awesome.
Thanks. Thanks for joining us this week on the 3XR podcast. Make sure to visit our website, 3xr.com, where you can subscribe to the show. While you're at it, if you found value in the show, we'd appreciate you simply telling a friend about it. Be sure to tune in next week for our next episode. Thanks for being a part of the 3XR community.